Let's turn to a guy who knows the healthcare industry inside out. He's the managing partner of PCS Advisors. It's a healthcare benefits consulting firm, 35 partner offices all across the nation, but there is only one, Paul Seegert. And he joins us here on 700 WLW. Paul, how are you on this glorious Saturday?
I'm doing great, Ken. How are you?
I'm well. What in God's name was Ron Johnson thinking of when he said that?
Well, I'm not a political expert, but when I step back and look at the situation, I see so many issues that Republicans can get a majority of the Americans to agree with them on, and this really isn't one of them. You've got, like so many other government programs, the longer it's here, the more people get accustomed to it and in some way kind of end up liking it. And that's the Affordable Care Act was not widely popular at first, but it's 60% now of adults in this country that are in favor of Obamacare. So I think it's maybe political suicide to talk about getting rid of Obamacare. And then the other thought I have whenever this conversation comes up is that Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act isn't necessarily the problem. It has many problems. We had many before, and it didn't really fix any. It added subsidies. We bought more overpriced coverage. The real solution, if we're ever going to get to it in how we all pay for health care, is to get free market forces involved in how we consume health care and give the American consumer the information they need to do that. So I think it's more about let's get an agenda where we can message to the American people, here are some tangible things that we could do that would fix the real problem, which is the fact that we pay way more than the rest of the world to get results that are not necessarily better.
Right, absolutely. About 31 million people get their health care coverage through the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. And during the pandemic, at a 6-month special sign-up, another million took advantage of it then. That was always the issue in 2016. I mean, the debate before that bill was passed was intense. The Republicans couldn't stop it. They didn't have control of the House or the Senate at the time. But the toothpaste is out of the tube. You're not going to put it back in. You're not suddenly going to tell 31 million Americans, sorry, you're out of luck. And that was the problem in 2016. The Republicans took control of the House and the Senate, and they had Donald Trump in the White House, and they still couldn't fix it. They still didn't have the votes, and they probably wouldn't have them this time around because you just don't have as many. You don't have the lockstep among that party that you have in the Democrat Party, and there are always the freelancers like Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski, who may or may not be back in the Senate, and Susan Collins. They don't walk in lockstep with the rest of the Republicans. It's a dead-end street. I agree with you. I think they ought to take a look at the healthcare industry right now and say, this is how we're going to take what we already have and fix the damn thing, as opposed to just saying we're going to blow up Obamacare. I think politically that would be the right road to walk down. Sounds like you do too.
We are definitely in agreement. I mean, you have a situation where we always end up arguing about should we subsidize people's care or not, and we don't get to the real conversation that could fix the problem, which is why is it overpriced? Where's the waste? How can we fix that? And I think that's because there are so many special interests, so many dollars that get spent on lobbying, it keeps us focused in the wrong areas. If we could, when you look at a health plan that's run effectively, it costs an employer, and employers are really the best example of how we could run healthcare better in this country because they can't print more money to pay for something that isn't a good value. They have to make their dollars work. And when they run their health plans effectively, they run them at half the cost of their peers with better quality because they're not tolerating waste in big key areas in their plans. We've talked on other conversations that we've had about drugs, about hospitals. I think drugs and hospitals are where we can do some of our best cleanup work to fix this problem. And it wouldn't be, were it not for political opposition, lobbying, and all the financial pressure against change, the solutions are not that difficult. If you look at surgeries that are elective, LASIK as an example, you can pay the same for LASIK now as you did 10 years ago, which means it's cheaper. Because they have to compete because insurance isn't involved. Anytime you look at a procedure where insurance isn't the payment model, those providers compete on cost and quality like every other thing we consume in the world. Right. We need that in healthcare. We don't really have it.
And that doesn't even get into pharmaceuticals. You know, Joe Biden made a point of talking about that in his State of the Union message. Now, like most of what he says, it's what we need to do this. There's never a roadmap as to how it's going to happen other than, you know, his group just spending more money and
right.
going down a bunch of rabbit holes to see how you can get drug prices down. It never happens. But if somebody or some bodies would actually tackle that and figure out, okay, why are all of these big drug manufacturers, Lilly, Pfizer, you pick a drug manufacturer, why are they charging so much for their proprietary drugs in the United States as opposed to what they're charging in other countries? And actually have these people that we elect not take lobby money from them and just say, I'm not going to do it, we're going to fix this. That, to me, would be a concrete step forward rather than just telling 31 million Americans, sorry, you're off the dole right now. Wouldn't you think so?
Exactly. Absolutely. When you look at drugs, it is such a perfect example of why we're off track, and it would not be hard to solve were it not for the power of lobbying in the industry itself. But it's also a classic example of the conversations that we have in political spaces. Like, for instance, in the State of the Union, the president says we're going to limit the cost of insulin to $35. And when you really drill down into the details, what he was saying was we're going to make a rule that they can't make your copay more than that. But we're still going to let them absolutely murder your health plan and make your health plan pay $550 a month when that same product is going to get sold overseas for $35 total. And that's the problem. And in fact, I was looking at a pregnancy test analyzing some data in a health plan this week. And the test, the provider of the test is billing an individual member in a health plan $8,000 for this test. And when our office called and it's not a covered item, it's not covered by the health plan, it's elective. When our office called and said, hey, this is not a covered item by this health plan, what's the cash price? The cash price was $249. When they know insurance is going to pay, that's 3,212%.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
that's the problem. But the consumer, when it's covered by their health care, their health insurance, they're only consuming in terms of copays and deductibles, and they don't have relation to actual cost. That is, by design, inefficient and allows for all this plundering of our system.
Let's revisit something that you and I talked about, because it still sticks with me, about pharmaceuticals and you get a prescription from your doctor, and honestly, a lot of doctors just write scripts and they don't consider whether or not a drug plan will pay for a lot of it or all of it or none of it. They're just prescribing medicine without, they just don't know. I mean, some of them get money to do that from the actual companies that make those drugs, or some of them are just so out of touch that they just don't know. They're just, here, this drug does this, you go get it filled, and the next thing you know, you're paying $600-700 for 30 days worth of pills. But you and I visited about something a while back about walking into a drugstore and saying cash price as opposed to trying to put it on your drug plan. Can we fatten that up a little bit and revisit what you and I talked about? Man, I'm going back about 6-9 months with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Go ahead, please.
And it kind of ties into Mark Cuban's new company. The issue, it's another issue where we're really preventing our system by design, because it's almost self-regulated, in my opinion, in any real way. We have a system where free market forces can't work, and so we get plundered as an economy. And drugs are such a great example of that. If I was to go into the pharmacy today and say, what's the cash price on a drug, they aren't allowed. If they take insurance, they're not allowed to determine their own cash price. So they can't say, hey, you know what, we bought this, we're getting this drug from a wholesaler or a manufacturer for $10. We're going to put $2 in markup, and that's going to be our margin. Mm-hmm. They can't do that. If they take insurance, it's dictated to them by the players in the insurance payment model. Mm-hmm. So you have an inflated, really false cash price. Montelukast is a really good example of that. It's a generic for singular. If you take insurance then you have to tell, and someone comes in and says, what's the cash price? Then you're going to have to tell them it's $400 for 90 days. Oh, well, what about with my insurance? It's only $25. But if they're few and far between, but there were some pharmacies that got so fed up, they decided they weren't going to take insurance anymore. And we actually use some of those. And when you go to one of those pharmacies, which now this is what Mark Cuban is doing, but he has bigger branding and name recognition and resources, so I think he has a chance to actually do something here. Those pharmacies that could actually offer you a fair cash price could sell that same drug at $34.50 for a year and make profit.
How do you find those places?
What's going on in our system?
Well, Paul, to someone who's listening, I mean, is it one of those deals you can go on a search engine and look for a pharmacy near you that does that? Because generally speaking, those smaller pharmacies don't have the ability to advertise on a radio station, television station, or newspaper.
Right.
How do we find those places?
It's going to be tough to find by the very fact that very few can survive without taking insurance. But now, ta-da! Now we have Mark Cuban Cost Plus Pharmacy, Cost Plus Drugs, or whatever. That he's doing that very model. He didn't invent it. He just came into the space and said, "Look, we could disrupt this, make it more efficient, and deliver some real value to consumers." I'm very excited about what he's doing. I hope it works out. He's doing what these little pharmacies have done in some rural areas and so on, a lot of them were religious based, where they're just they're nonprofits, they're just trying to actually do the right thing. He's doing this at a scale, I think, where it could really make an impact. So I think people should go check his facility out, his pharmacy out, right online, and see. Maybe it makes sense.
Paul Seegert, you are always good, chock full of great information. Paul Seegert, you can find him at pcsadvisors.com. We will talk down the road again, my friend. Stay well, okay?